Hello Year 12s, welcome to this video on stakeholders. In fact, this video is the first of 3 videos on stakeholders, and in this video I will be giving you an introduction to the topic. There are 2 important factors that affect the success of a business. These are stakeholders and corporate culture. In this series of videos we are going to be looking at stakeholders. Now there are 3 things that you need to do while you're watching this video. The first thing is to take the very best Cornell notes that you can. The second thing is to use the pause and rewind functions. Use the pause function if you need to stop this video so that you can take notes. Use the rewind function if you miss any information so that you can go back over that information. The third thing that you need to do is to have your vocabulary sheets handy in front of you so that you can include in them the definitions of any important terms as well as the definitions of any other words that you may not be familiar with. Once you've finished watching this series of videos, then please make sure that you read the pages of the textbook referred to in the first slide, and if you find any additional useful information in that reading, please supplement your Cornell notes with that information. I have set out your learning intentions for this topic on this slide. Make sure that you write these learning intentions in your Cornell notes. The first learning intention is that you should be able to describe the characteristics of stakeholders of businesses, including their interests, potential conflicts between stakeholders, and corporate social responsibility considerations. The purpose of this series of 3 videos is to assist you to achieve this first learning intention. And in this video, we will be focusing on the requirement that you should be able to describe the characteristics of stakeholders of businesses. The second learning intention is that you should be able to apply these concepts to case studies. You will be able to achieve this learning intention by completing the tasks that I give you in class. Let's get started then. Here's our first important definition. This is the definition of a stakeholder. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the term stakeholder, and write this definition in there. A stakeholder is an individual or group that has a direct interest or a vested interest in the activities of a business. Once you've written this definition in your vocabulary sheets, highlight the words direct interest and vested interest. And if you're ever asked to define a stakeholder, make sure that you include those highlighted words in your definition. Another word for a direct interest is an immediate interest, and another word for a vested interest is a special interest. One example of a group that has a direct or immediate interest, as well as a vested or a special interest in the activities of a business, is employees. Employees have a direct or immediate interest in the business that employs them because they work in the business. Employees also have a vested or special interest in the business that employs them because if the business doesn't succeed, then those employees may have to take a pay cut, or at worst, they may even lose their jobs. Stakeholders can affect or be affected by the operations of the business. Taking our example of employees again. Employees can affect the operations of the business that employs them because the business depends on its employees to operate the business in an effective and efficient manner. This means that the employees must be motivated to properly perform their tasks, and they must have the skills which are necessary to enable them to perform those tasks. Employees can also be affected by the operations of the business. If the corporate culture of the business doesn't take into account the needs of employees and doesn't make them feel valued, then employees will not be motivated to work hard for the business. Now, students often make a very common mistake, which is they confuse stakeholders and shareholders. Don't make that mistake. Shareholders are the owners of shares in a company. They are an example of a stakeholder, but they are not the definition of stakeholder. On the contrary, stakeholder, as I've said, is an individual or group that has a direct interest or a vested interest in the activities of a business. There are 11 different types of stakeholders in a business, and we're going to look at these in some detail in the second video. These 11 are as follows. First, shareholders or owners of the business. Second, the directors of the business, at least where the business is a company. Third, management of the business. Fourth, employees in the business. Fifth, customers of the business. Sixth, the suppliers of inputs to the business. Seventh, creditors of the business, that is, people who lend money to the business, such as banks. Eighth, trade unions. Trade unions represent employees in the business. Ninth, competitors of the business. 10th, the community in which the business operates. And 11th, the government. Now, businesses don't operate in a vacuum. Instead, they operate in an environment which is populated by the stakeholders of the business. This environment has 3 levels. The first level of the environment in which a business operates is the internal environment. The internal environment refers to the activities within a business over which the business has control. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the term internal environment and write this definition in there. Once you've done that, highlight the words in red, bold, italic type. If ever you're asked to define or describe the internal environment for a business, make sure that you include these highlighted words in your definition or description. The second level of the environment in which a business operates is the operating environment. The operating environment is the environment immediately external to a business and with which the business has close interaction when conducting its activities. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheet, find the term operating environment and write this definition in there. Once you've done that, highlight in your definition the words in red, bold, italics type. And if ever you're asked to define or describe the operating environment for a business, make sure that you include in that definition or description the highlighted words. The third and final level of the environment in which a business operates is the macro environment. The macro environment refers to the broad operating conditions in which a business operates and over which the business has no control. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the term macro environment and write this definition in there. Once you've done that, highlight in your definition the words in red, bold, italics type. And if ever you're asked to define or describe the macro environment for a business, make sure that you include in that definition or description the highlighted words. As I've said, the different stakeholders for a business are located throughout these different levels of the environment. The stakeholders that are located in the internal environment are the shareholders, in the case of a company, or the owners, in the case of a partnership or sole trader, the directors, in the case of a company, management, and employees. These are stakeholders who are all directly involved in the operations of the business. The shareholders or owners of the business own the business. The directors, at least where the business is a company, determine the business strategy for the business. The management team sets and implements the business objectives that are necessary to achieve the business strategy for the business. And the employees work in producing the goods and services that are sold by the business. The stakeholders that are located in the operating environment are customers of the business, suppliers of inputs to the business, creditors, that is, lenders such as banks to the business, trade unions, which represent employees in the business, and competitors of the business. These are all stakeholders with whom the business has close interaction. Customers buy the goods and services which are produced by the business. Suppliers supply the inputs to the business that the business needs to produce those goods and services. Creditors, such as banks, lend money to the business so that the business can pay its expenses. Trade unions represent the employees of the business, for example, by negotiating the terms and conditions on which employees of the business are employed by the business. And finally, competitors of the business compete to obtain the customers of the business and to try to persuade those customers to buy goods and services from them rather than from the business. The stakeholders that are located in the macro environment are the community and the government. All businesses operate in a community and they can have an effect on the community. For example, a business can have a positive impact on a community by employing local people, by buying locally produced inputs, and by sponsoring community projects such as the local sporting team. However, a business can also have a negative impact on the community, for example, where it pollutes the environment. Now, unlike the other environments, a business has no real control over the community as a stakeholder for the business. It can't make the community do what the business wants it to do. Similarly, all businesses are affected by the government because the government taxes the profits of the business and also makes laws that the business must obey. However, again, a business has no real control over the government. The government is elected by voters and the business can't make the government do what the business wants the government to do. That brings us to the end of this video, and you should now be able to describe the characteristics of stakeholders of businesses. I look forward to you joining me for the second video. Thanks very much for your attention.